When I first met Daniel, he felt like peace after years of chaos. I just moved into a new apartment, started a demanding job, and promised myself I was done with love for a while, but he appeared like something out of a novel, calm, confident, and almost too observant. We met at a bookstore cafe downtown, the kind with uneven floors and mismatched chairs. I was reaching for a copy of East of Eden, and so was he. Our hands brushed. It was such a cliche that I laughed, but instead of pulling away, he smiled. "You can have it," he said, "but only if you promise to tell me what you think of it over coffee sometime." That was Daniel. Smooth, but not arrogant. Warm, but mysterious enough to make you want to know more. Our first coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a weekend trip to the coast. Within 3 months, I'd fallen into his rhythm completely. He had an easy charm that made me feel safe. He asked questions, real ones, and remembered every answer. My favorite flower, the sound of my grandmother's old record player, even how I hated sleeping with the window closed because I needed to hear the rain. When he proposed, it wasn't a grand gesture. We were sitting on my balcony, wine glasses half empty, the city lights flickering below. He took my hand and said, almost shyly, "You feel like home to me." Then he slipped the ring on my finger. No one had ever made me feel that seen. The wedding was small. His idea. "I don't like big crowds," he'd said. I believed him. We invited only family and close friends. His parents were overseas, he said, too old to travel. His best friend, Mark, stood by his side. Mark was quiet, almost awkward, but Daniel said they'd been through everything together. For the first few months, marriage was everything I'd hoped for. Breakfast together, late-night walks, Sunday mornings tangled in sheets and laughter. He called me his light. I told my friends I'd finally found my person. Still, even in those perfect days, there were tiny moments that didn't quite fit, fleeting shadows I brushed off, like how he never let me pick him up from work. "Parking's a nightmare," he'd say, or "I'll grab a cab." He claimed his company was strict about visitors. I believed him, or how his phone was always face down on the table, on silent. Once, when it buzzed during dinner, I saw a name flash, Anna, before he quickly turned it over. "My sister," he said, smiling easily. "She worries too much." He had a sister I'd never spoken to, never met, and somehow I didn't ask why. Love can make you blind, but I think it's more accurate to say it makes you see what you want to see. And I wanted Daniel to be everything he said he was. It started small, so small I told myself I was imagining things. The first time was a Tuesday. Daniel had said he was working late on a new client pitch. Around 9 p.m., I texted to ask if he'd eaten. No reply. By 11, I called, straight to voicemail. He came home close to midnight, smelling faintly of someone else's perfume. Not mine. It was soft, floral, expensive. I didn't recognize it. "Long night," he sighed, loosening his tie. "Sorry, I didn't see your messages." I wanted to believe him. His voice was calm, his eyes steady. He never stuttered, never looked away. He even handed me his phone, almost casually. "See? No missed calls." And he was right. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. But the call log had been cleared. I laughed it off. Maybe I'd called the wrong number. Maybe I was just tired. That's what love does. It convinces you to edit reality until it fits your hopes. Then came the weekends. Daniel used to love lazy Sundays, pancakes and coffee, staying in bed until noon, but slowly, he started disappearing. "Meeting an old friend," he'd say. "Need to stop by the office," or "Mark's having a tough time. I'll be back later." Sometimes he'd come home looking drained, his shirt untucked, eyes distant. I'd ask how his friend was doing, and he'd give short, vague answers. "It's complicated," he'd say. "Don't worry about it." He still held me, still kissed my forehead before bed, still said he loved me every morning. That's what made it harder. He never changed in the ways that would make doubt easy. But there were things he couldn't control, like the slip of paper I found in his jacket pocket, an appointment card for a doctor's office I'd never heard of. The name written on it wasn't his, Daniel Wright. I confronted him that night. "Why does this have a different name?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice trembled. He didn't even flinch. "Oh, that," he said, chuckling softly. "They must have mixed up the files. I was filling out some forms for Mark. He didn't have his ID." I stared at him. It sounded ridiculous, but he said it so smoothly that for a second it made sense. I let it go, but the lies began to stack up, thin as paper, but heavy in number. Then, one evening, he left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. Daniel was private with his electronics. He guarded them like a secret. But that night, he'd stepped out to take a call. The screen was glowing, an email still open. My name wasn't in it. It was addressed to someone named Claire. "I can't keep doing this," it said. "She's starting to notice." I froze. My body went cold. He walked in seconds later. I closed the laptop before he saw me. He smiled. "Everything okay?" I smiled back. "Yeah, everything's fine." That night, I didn't sleep. My mind spun with possibilities. Maybe Claire was a colleague. Maybe she referred to someone else. Maybe. A few days later, I tested him. I asked if he'd ever been to Chicago. He shook his head. "No, why?" But I'd already seen a photo tagged of him on Facebook 5 years ago, standing beside a woman outside a Chicago restaurant. The photo had been hidden from his timeline, but not completely. Her caption read, "Dinner with my favorite person." Her name? Claire Morgan. I wanted to scream. Instead, I copied her name and did what I'd never done before. I searched. She had a public Instagram account. Pictures of a cozy suburban house, a golden retriever, 2 kids, and there, tucked between vacation shots and birthday cakes, was Daniel. Smiling, holding a toddler, the caption, "Family Picnic June." I stared at it for minutes that felt like hours. My stomach turned. My heart felt like it was folding in on itself. He had another life, another woman, another family. But the worst part? The timestamp on the photo was just 3 months ago. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted proof, something undeniable, because part of me still hoped there was a mistake, a misunderstanding, maybe a twin, maybe an old photo. But I already knew the truth. And yet, I made him breakfast the next morning, smiled when he kissed my cheek, pretended to be the woman he thought I was, obedient, trusting, quiet. Because I needed time. Time to plan what I'd do when the lies finally collapsed. The morning after I saw that photo, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger at first. It was a quiet, steady kind of calm. The kind that comes when the truth is too heavy to ignore anymore. I started paying attention. Every detail I'd once ignored started making sense. The business trips, the late-night calls, the phone always face down, the vague stories about Mark's problems. I realized Mark might not even exist. Or if he did, he wasn't the problem Daniel was solving. I made a plan. First, I waited for him to leave for work. I told him I'd be working from home. The moment the door shut, I opened his laptop. The password was the same as always, our anniversary date. The irony almost made me laugh. There it was, an email folder named Personal. Inside were dozens of messages from Claire Morgan. I opened one. "Can you pick up the kids after school today? I have that meeting at the hospital. Love you. C." Another. "Dinner was amazing last night. Thank you for making time for us. The kids adore you." And then one that made my blood run cold. I still can't believe you married her. You promised this would end. We can't keep living like this." There it was. Confirmation. He hadn't just been lying to me. He'd been lying to her, too. For hours, I sat there reading every message, tracing the timeline of his deceit. It went back years, before we met, before our wedding, before every promise he'd whispered into my ear. He'd built 2 lives, parallel worlds running side by side, never meant to touch. I found photos too, Daniel and Claire with their kids, trips to the zoo, a Christmas tree with matching pajamas. One photo stopped me cold. It was taken the same weekend he'd told me he was at a corporate retreat. In it, he was holding Claire's hand, smiling like a man completely at peace. My hands were shaking, but I needed more. I logged into our bank account and noticed a second checking account linked to his name, one he'd never mentioned. I clicked through the statements. Payments to a private school, grocery stores near Chicago, jewelry stores, hotel bookings. He was financing 2 households. I copied everything, emails, statements, photos, onto a flash drive. I wasn't sure why. Maybe for proof. Maybe because I needed to see it laid out, to remind myself that I wasn't imagining it. That night, he came home early with flowers. "For no reason," he said, smiling. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. He cooked dinner, told me about his day, asked about mine. His eyes were soft, his tone warm, his lies seamless. I watched him and wondered how many versions of him existed, how many faces he could wear. After dinner, I excused myself and went into the bathroom. I looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back. There was sadness, yes, but also something sharper, colder. I whispered to myself, "You're not crazy. You know what you saw." The next day, I called in sick to work. I needed to know if Claire knew about me, or if she was as deceived as I'd been. Her number wasn't hard to find. It was in one of the email signatures. My hand trembled as I dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, older than I expected. "Hi," I said, my throat dry. "I'm sorry to bother you. I think we might have someone in common. Daniel." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "What did you say?" she asked, her tone suddenly tense. "Daniel Morgan," I said. "Or Daniel Wright. I'm not sure what name you know him by." The pause stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she whispered, "Who are you?" "I'm his wife," I said. "We've been married for almost 2 years." Another silence. Then a quiet, broken laugh that didn't sound amused. "No," she said. "That's not possible. We've been married for 11. The world tilted. My knees gave out, and I sat on the floor. I could hear her breathing hard on the other end. We talked for nearly an hour. Her voice was steady, but I could tell she was shaking too. She told me about their children, their home in Chicago, how Daniel worked remotely but traveled often for business. When I told her about my wedding, she went silent again. "He told me his company sent him abroad that month," she finally said. We both sat in stunned quiet, realizing how deep the lie went. Before we hung up, she said something I'll never forget. "I always felt like there was someone else," she said softly. "I just didn't think she'd be you." When I ended the call, I sat there for a long time. Everything I thought I knew, every memory, every promise, felt like fiction. But beneath the shock, something fierce started to grow. Not just anger, not just grief, a need for truth. He'd built his empire of lies brick by brick. Now I was going to burn it down. I had a plan that felt simple and savage at the same time. I wanted him to look at the pieces of his life and see them separate, one by one. I wanted him to understand what his lies had done to people who trusted him. I wanted him to see Claire and me standing in the same room. I called her that morning and asked if she could come. She hesitated, understandably, but then said yes. She was bringing her sister, she told me, and an old friend who could keep the kids for a few hours. I told myself I didn't need witnesses, but I wanted them anyway. There was safety in numbers, and there was a cold comfort in solidarity. I cleared the kitchen table and laid everything out. Printouts of emails, copies of bank statements, screenshots of Instagram posts, the appointment card, the flash drive with all the files. I made coffee. I tried to keep my hands steady. My palms were dry despite the tremor that wouldn't stop. At noon, they arrived. Claire was smaller in person than in the photos. Up close, I could see the tiredness around her eyes, the same tiredness I recognized in myself. Her sister was quieter, and the friend, soft-spoken, kept glancing at me like she didn't want to step on a landmine. When I explained, there were no gasps, no dramatic gestures, just a slow, awful clarity that settled over the room. We agreed to do it at my place. "We should tell him together," Claire said. Her voice didn't waver. They sat at the table with me while I set a recorder on speaker. My hands couldn't stop shaking, so the device felt like a lifeline. I told them I'd confront him that evening when he came home. Claire suggested I tell him nothing beforehand. "Let him talk," she said. "If he can't lie to your face, you'll know everything." I wanted the confrontation to hurt him in the simplest way, by showing him how the two lives he'd stitched together could never fit on the same frame. That afternoon, I moved through the house like someone operating on autopilot. I hung extra towels in the bathroom, smoothed the throw on the couch. I opened the curtains to let the light in. The ordinary acts of homemaking felt like armor. He came home later than usual. I could hear his keys before I saw him, the noise of the hallway door opening, his footsteps heavy with the weight of the day. He walked into the living room and stopped when he saw us. His face was blank for a beat, then his mask of mild surprise slid into place. "Everything okay?" he asked, too casual. I didn't answer. Claire stood up. She was the first to speak to him the way I'd never been able to, direct and steady. "Daniel," she said, "we need to talk." He smiled as if he was playing along with some odd domestic joke. "Claire, what are you— You know what this is about," she said. Her voice was smaller, but it reached him like a bell. Then I did something I could never have imagined myself doing months earlier. I put a folder on the table and pushed it toward him. "Proof," I said. "Emails, photos, bank statements, your life in 2 pieces." He looked at the folder long enough that I thought he might walk away. Instead, he picked up the first page and flicked through it with the kind of bored curiosity a man has when he thinks he's in control. I could see his jaw working behind his thin smile. "This is ridiculous," he said finally, as if that word could erase everything. "You've been going through my things?" "My things?" Claire's laugh was a sound I've tried to forget, equal parts pain and disbelief. "This is my husband." "Married?" Daniel echoed, and for the first time, something like panic flashed on his face. "Claire, what are you— This isn't how— You told me you were married," Claire said, stepping forward. "You told me you were committed. You told me we were married 11 years. You told me you loved me." A silence fell. His eyes darted between us, then to the recorder on the table. He tried a few familiar moves, denial, minimization, flirty charm, but they all felt ragged. He reached for the script he used on everyone. "I'm sorry. I'll explain. It's complicated." "It is complicated," he said, and the word came out thin and raw. "It's messy. We separated. We were separated." "You married me 2 years ago," I said. 11 years isn't separation." He swallowed. He looked at his hands, then at me. I never meant to hurt you, he said. You know that. I love you. Love? Claire snapped. You have a family, Daniel. That's not a side thing. That's a life. He flinched, as if caught by a physical blow. For a second he was silent. Then he leaned in, voice low and urgent. We were separated. I filed something. Things were in motion. You were there. I told you what you needed to hear. You lied, I said. The words came out flat, controlled. You lied to both of us. He tried to make eye contact, to hold it. I was stuck, he said. It's not simple. There are legal things. I thought I could fix everything and then tell you. You thought you could have both? Claire's voice trembled. You thought 2 marriages, 2 families, 2 versions of yourself could exist without collapsing? He looked at her like a child caught stealing candy. I didn't know how to stop. Mark, he'd called him, the non-existent friend. He'd blamed obligations, travel, corporate retreats. He tried to throw up a wall of excuses, long hours, pressure at work, a sick parent. But none of those things explained a second household, a second bank account, a second set of promises. I wanted to be angrier than I was. Instead, I felt hollowed out, like someone had taken a scoop of me and left a neat, raw space behind. Claire sat down hard. Her sister reached for her hand. For a breath, the room was full of the small, ordinary gestures that had kept our lives from falling apart until now. Then Daniel did something I hadn't expected. He begged. Please, he said, too quickly. Please don't do this here. We can talk. I can explain. I'll leave if you want me to. Explain what? I asked. How you built 2 lives. How you put our children in different worlds. How you thought that was okay. He opened his mouth and closed it. For a few beats there was shame, or maybe panic. Hard to tell. Then he turned to Claire as if pleading for an ally. Claire, you said, he began, but she cut him off. There are texts where you sign with our kids' names, she said. There are receipts for presents you bought them last Christmas. You're not a ghost in my life. You were in it. Something in him shifted. The practiced composure drained away and left a man raw and small. He gripped the back of a chair as if to steady himself. I'm sorry, he said, the words finally losing their polish. I'm sorry to both of you. I don't know how it happened. It just did. It was the kind of apology that asks nothing of the one who receives it. I wanted to shout, to name the months of deceit, the countless waking hours he'd taken from me, the nights he'd come home smelling like someone else. I wanted to tell him about the ways I'd changed for him, the little shreds of my life I'd given away. Instead, I watched him flounder, and something fiercer rose in me. You're leaving, I said. He looked at me like I had spoken in an unknown tongue. Leaving? You're leaving tonight, I said. You can take the things you've hidden. You can pick a life and live it. But you can't have both any longer. He laughed then, not a good laugh, but a hysterical one. You can't do that. You can't just... I can, I said, and I will. He stepped toward me, anger flashing. You think you can just throw me out? With no proof? I have proof, Claire said, lifting the folder. And so do I. There was a long, terrible pause. He looked from Claire to me, to the documents, to the recorder. The house had never felt smaller. He grabbed his keys and his coat. He didn't argue further. He left with the same quiet that had marked so many evenings. No slammed doors, no dramatic exits. He closed the front door behind him like someone sealing a bundle. He looked back at the doorway for a second, and in that second, I saw a man who had never learned to be honest. When the door shut, the three of us breathed as if released from a held breath. We sat at the table, the recorder humming, the evidence spread like bones. Claire cried then, not loudly, just small, shaking sobs. I felt something in me unspooling, neither wholly relief nor entirely defeat. We made calls. Lawyers, Claire's friend who watched the kids, my sister who arrived with extra blankets. We didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch and ran my hands over the folder until the edges softened. He had left, but the house felt full of him. His cologne lingered in the coat he'd forgotten on the back of a chair. There was an imprint on the pillow where he'd rested his head. The life he'd promised was a thick, stubborn presence you couldn't simply sweep away. By dawn, the city was quiet and ordinary. Somewhere outside, someone took out the trash. Inside, the world I had believed in had been rearranged, its foundation cracked open like an old wound. We thought that was the end. We thought the confrontation would force a decision, and that decision would end him or us cleanly. But lies have tendrils. They wrap into places you wouldn't expect. The truth clears as much as it complicates. When he returned 3 nights later with a box and a face that tried to look contrite, I realized how naive that hope had been. The next move he made would change everything, but not in the way any of us expected. I didn't know it then. I only knew that the confrontation had broken something, either him or us. Which one would be revealed in the days to come. When he came back 3 nights later, I was sitting in the same spot he'd left me. The lights were dim, a single lamp glowing in the corner. I'd thought a lot about what I'd say if he returned, but when the door opened, every speech I'd written in my head vanished. He looked smaller. The arrogance was gone. He carried a cardboard box and wore the same jacket he'd left behind. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. I didn't answer at first. Claire had already warned me. He'll come back. Not because he loves you, but because he needs control. He set the box down on the table. The same table where I'd laid out his lies. "These are my things," he said. "I didn't want you to throw them out." "Take them," I said quietly, "and then leave." He didn't move. Instead, he sat across from me, hands clasped, the way someone might pray. "I lost everything," he said. "You, her, the kids. I don't even know who I am anymore." I almost laughed. "You don't know who you are? You've had 2 chances to figure it out." He flinched. "You don't understand. I never meant for this to go so far." "That's the thing, Daniel," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "It didn't go anywhere. You built it. You made a choice over and over to lie." He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "I loved you both." That line hit me like a slap. "You can't love 2 people," I said. "Not like that. You just loved what we gave you. Her stability, my attention, your illusion of being good at everything." He didn't argue. He just sat there, the weight of silence pressing on both of us. Then he said something so strange, so pathetic. I'll never forget it. "I thought I could fix it if I kept everyone happy." There it was. His truth. Selfish, simple, cowardly. I stood. "Do you think we're happy now?" He didn't answer. He gathered his things quietly. His face was pale, hollow, almost ghost-like. When he reached the door, he turned. "I hope someday you'll forgive me." I didn't look up. "Forgiveness isn't for you," I said. "It's for me, and I'm not there yet." The door clicked shut. That sound, so soft, so final, was the real ending of our marriage. The weeks that followed were quiet. The house felt both emptier and lighter. I changed the locks. I took his name off the mailbox. I went to therapy. Some nights, I still woke up expecting to hear his keys in the bowl by the door. Claire and I spoke a few times after that. Our conversations were cautious at first, two wounded strangers connected by betrayal. But slowly, something unexpected formed, a strange kind of friendship built on honesty. We compared timelines, shared lawyer updates, and sometimes just sat in silence on the phone. There was something healing in knowing the other person understood without needing an explanation. Her divorce went through before mine. She told me the kids were adjusting. She sounded stronger every time we spoke. Mine took longer. Daniel tried to contest some of it, property, shared accounts, but eventually, even he got tired of fighting. His signature on the final papers came by mail, scrawled and sloppy, like a man signing away a life he never really lived. I didn't cry when it was over. I thought I might. Instead, I felt relief. Like I could finally breathe after holding it in for years. Months later, I ran into him by accident. I was in line at a coffee shop downtown, and there he was, standing a few people ahead, alone. His hair was grayer. He looked thinner, older. When our eyes met, he froze. For a second, time folded back. I saw the man I'd met in that same kind of cafe years ago, the one who smiled easily and promised forever. But this time, there was no warmth, just distance. He gave a small nod. I nodded back. Neither of us said a word. When he left, I noticed he didn't order anything. Maybe he couldn't afford to. Maybe he didn't know what he wanted anymore. I walked home that day feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from surviving. There's a strange freedom in truth, even when it breaks you. You stop needing explanations. You stop replaying the lies. You just accept that some people will never be who they said they were. Sometimes I think about that night, the confrontation, the shock, the tears, and I realize it was never just about betrayal. It was about clarity. He lied about everything, even his wife. But in the wreckage he left behind, I found something he never had. Honesty. Honesty with myself. And that, I think, was the most shocking ending of all.